Hi-ho, Nation, Harry Brailsford here, coming to you from Austin, Texas. So a little bit of context before we get into our webinar. This is the final session of the summer quarter. And I realize we have crossed over into fall as of the 21st of the month, but bear with us. What a quarter it was this summer. We hit some topics head on, including Azure and SMB was especially popular. But today, another popular topic, an emerging topic, quite frankly, for a lot of us, is SD-WAN. What goes around comes around. Have a couple experts I'll introduce in a moment. So I just finished attending the Spiceworks Spice World 2019 conference here in Austin, my 5th year. Folks, it's a must-do. People wear costumes. It's the Comic Con of technology conferences. They have a really, really robust culture. However, it is primarily IT pros. So I probably saw 5 MSPs out of 2,500 attendees, but very technical conference. And in fact, yesterday I attended an SD-WAN conference to just better educate myself on the topic. I have requested from Spiceworks the replay link. They were filming the lecture in the room, and I've requested permission and the link, so we can get that up at a future date for y'all to double click a little further. With that said, so what now? I just finished Spiceworks, Spice World. Next week I'm in Pittsburgh at the Continuum Navigate conference. The following week I'll be in Montreal at the SureWeb Accelerate conference. Then I got a conference in Portland, IT Nation, Ingram One. I know I'm forgetting a couple, but always like to see people when I'm out on the road. So next week it's Pittsburgh, and that's basically Tuesday. My main day is Tuesday. Come in Monday, head on Tuesday, and I'm out on Wednesday, although the conference does go to the end of the day on Wednesday. With that said, let's get going. So we have David Yang, who's joining us from Exclusive Networks, and I do want to give a shout out because of Exclusive Networks and Fortinet. We're on the air, and it's more telling than ever because I've been listening to public radio down here, and Jenny, you'll laugh, but it's their annual fundraising drive on KUTX as well as KEXP up in Seattle. So I always get a chuckle when public radio goes on their annual fundraising drive. We're a little bit different. We are supported by well-behaved and well-trained community sponsors. And we will hear from David specifically about Exclusive Networks later, although David has also agreed to be an academic panelist. I'm Harry Brailsford, SMB Nation, and then we have Wim, who I've become fast friends with. Wim is Canadian, so you know he's cool. He's up in Vancouver, BC, just north of where we domicile in Seattle. And Wim brings significant technical expertise. My head was spinning as we put together the lectures. Ergo, I had to go to a lecture just to bring it all together so I know what's going on. Let's jump into it. So, well, gentlemen, first of all, let me back up. David, please introduce yourself. Where are you today? What's your story? Then I'll do the same with Wim. Hello, David.
Hi, thank you, Harry. Hi, everyone. My name is David Yang. I'm coming from San Jose, California. So I'm West Coast time. I know Harry is already started to have some lunch. So
Yeah.
very nice. I'm representing Exclusive Networks. We are probably the largest distributor for Fortinet products throughout the world, and mainly handling the technical support and services for the North America, which is including Canada and US.
All right. Thank you, David. And Wim, go ahead and brag about yourself, my friend. You have quite an illustrious career in technical expertise. Hello, Wim. And Wim, let's double check our volume.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Yeah, so where shall I start? I guess we go back like 20 years ago in the days of dial-up internet and how that was exploding, getting high speed. Yeah, I got into Linux really early and using Linux for advanced networking and sharing my dial-up internet with the rest of the house, and then cable modem with the rest of the house back in those days. And got into working for a network vendor about 20 years ago, building firewalls using Linux. So really got into VPNs and networking and security then already. And yeah, so today I've actually got two MSPs, one on the Windows side, one on the Linux side under Crafty Penguins. That's I have this one here, the Crafty Penguins, and we have two brands, as well as we have a product for MSPs called CW Kanban, which helps MSPs visualize their workflow. So project, help desk, sales, all of that, whether you're ConnectWise or Autopass. So that's growing nicely as well. So yeah, into a lot of things, and it's a ton of fun, and out here near Vancouver, BC.
There we go. Okay, now we can jump into it. And again, thanks to Exclusive Networks and Fortinet. So, Wim, let's get this party started. I'm going to kind of have you be the lead dog, and David will follow, and I'm just hanging on for dear life. So, Wim, the first topic is, quite frankly, I kind of put these bullet points in order because of our audience of MSPs and partners and resellers. So basically, in this first point to the left, we're talking about what is SD-WAN. And it provides more complex routing, traffic control than firewalls normally provide, being aware of the application. So Wim, let's talk about that. What is, the question is, what is SD-WAN?
It's a new buzzword for something that's been around for probably 30 or 40 years, in my opinion. But literally, the letters are software-defined wide area networking. And if you look back, well, wide area networking has always had code, software code at some level, whether it's in your chips, in your switch or your router, or at higher levels like proxy servers and firewalls and such. So I think this word came out, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, and I just see a lot of vendors using that, kind of like how we jumped on the whole cloud bandwagon over the last 5 years or so. It's like cloud has been around for a long time. It's just somebody else's hardware. But yeah, what it represents today is really more complex routing than your firewall would do. So if you had a FortiGate or a Sophos firewall or a SonicWall, SD-WAN will have additional features that your normal, if you just had a single site, single location, SD-WAN wouldn't be really for you. It's more if you got multiple locations where it really comes in, or you've got a really tough connection, like low bandwidth, poor quality, it can provide value there. But generally, it's multiple site, more of an enterprise type scenario. Yeah. That's the way I look at SD-WAN. There's a lot of features in there that some of these vendors throw in there. So,
well, we're going to cover that. Yesterday, at the lecture I went to, the gentleman, and again, Wim, I'm clearly a student in this area, but he talked about agent-based SD-WAN scenarios versus hardware-based. And so we'll circle back to that. We have a lot of points to cover today, folks, but I learned something. David, would you like to pitch in on what is SD-WAN?
Yeah, so SD-WAN is basically the main reason for that is to replace very costly MPLS, as Wayne probably already mentioned. From my point of view, SD-WANs open up a whole different scenario for anyone who want to connect to internet, and as well as we so-called digital transformation to connect to your own branch office. If you have a different office in different region, different countries, different continent that you want to connect. In the past, using MPLS is a private, is more secure in that sense, and SD-WAN basically just try to save the cost. However, comes after would be the security concern.
Yeah, that was a big part of yesterday's speech. The gentleman who was speaking was an IT pro from I think a 41 location assisted living conglomerate. I kind of view all that as healthcare. And David, to your point, a big part of his speech was cost reduction. And which gets us to the next point, Wim, that SD-WAN provides higher SLA levels without the high cost of MPLS. We've essentially said that, but in your own words, it sounds like we're balancing happy medium. Let's talk about point number 2, Wim.
Yeah, so the way in my area, MPLS has been really expensive. Like, if you look at, well, this is a bit more 10 years ago, but you could get like a T1 internet or like a 10 megabit Ethernet fiber, and you'd be paying $1,000, $2,000 a site. Even on an ADSL line, they're calling it MPLS and they're prioritizing VoIP over your bulk data, so it's with quality of service, but it's still very expensive. And then the other opposite end of the spectrum is your broadband, where you pay $50 or $100 a month, but it's not guaranteed. You could be down 3 days, and Comcast doesn't really care. That sort of thing. So, and you have MPLS. MPLS has got teeth in the contract where they say, if you're down more than 4 hours, we're giving you money back. Like there's these uptime guarantees and response guarantees. So MPLS SD-WAN is more in the middle. Like, how do we give you higher reliability, better monitoring, better response, without the very high cost of these dedicated circuits and MPLS?
Hey, Harry, can I hear you?
Oops, I hit the mute thing. Thank you, David. Wim, I was saying that is funny. You mentioned Comcast because that was the foil of a couple of jokes yesterday from the IT Pro and lecture. So that brought some chuckles. In a similar vein, David, I'll look to you to also chirp up if you would like to comment on these points that are flying by. I know we kind of covered off on some of this about the economics. And while we're doing that, folks, be sure to use the questions feature over on your control panel, typically over on your right, and ask your questions. And Jennifer Hallmark in the radio control room will step in, interrupt us, and ask the questions on your behalf. So, David, without further ado, let's go to the next slide. So, we're talking provisioning. Provisioning is really important, how to roll out easily and smoothly, considering MSPs have no idea how the technology works. Wim, let's talk provisioning.
Yeah, so provisioning, well, from my point of view, is basically it actually evolved from earlier version of so-called WAN optimization, and because the internet is so popular and there's so many different carriers, so like Wayne mentioned, there's ADSL, there's UVerse from AT&T, there's Comcast. Then nowadays there's a fiber. Even we have a fiber in California, which is very surprising to me nowadays. But last week, AT&T just come over to dig a trench and try to lay out a fiber. And any other country, and same thing. So there we have a multiple choice for the WAN internet connectivities. Now, how do you provision them versus higher bandwidth versus slow bandwidth, higher throughput versus slow throughput? And then you also have different application. You need to understand how the application work, what kind of a bandwidth they need. Then you need to provision them properly to get most optimization way of using your internet services.
Yep. Wim, thoughts on provisioning? You and I talked about this in preparing the deck about some work you're doing in terms of improving quality of service and provisioning and so on.
Yeah, so on provisioning, what comes to mind for me is, okay, your salesperson has sold the solution to the client on the benefits and solving their pain. Now, how quickly can we get it on site and then the client getting value from it? And not having that be a 4-week process or months, but how do we do this quickly, even with a junior tech? So that comes into, do they need to go through training, or is it intuitive, easy to do? With the company I had, which was an SD-WAN provider, and I sold last year, we looked at how do we almost get a zero touch. So in our scenario, they could actually use their own hardware. So they would buy the device and then load up our software on it. So it made it really easy, pop it on a USB stick, put it in the device, boot it up, put in your serial number or your license key, and then it downloads the configuration. So trying to make it auto-discover, auto provisioning, because when you look at SD-WAN, obviously you're sitting on top of your existing internet connections. You're going to go to your Comcast, your AT&T, a wireless provider, get your connection, and now you're going to plug it into your device. So we made that easy with things like DHCP. You plug it in, and it just comes online. But yeah, you got to understand the speeds of the connection. Do you want to use all your connections or some of them? What type of traffic is going through it? What are the IP addresses? So that's really important. Like, you don't want to have your junior one techs having to go into a command line interface, a console window, and trying to program this thing as if it was 1999. Making it web-based and intuitive and kind of idiot-proof is really important.
That's good. Yeah, there's a song about 1999. David, I want you to kind of lead on the sales and marketing conversation. Obviously, folks can read the bullet point, but Exclusive Networks is a distributor, and you work with partners and MSPs and resellers. So, what challenges are you seeing in the sales and marketing of SD-WAN out there?
Yeah, so basically because the buzzword, right? So people all flock into the SD-WAN, try to understand what SD-WAN is really about. But to simply put, I think just basically you're saying you have multiple internet connection and you want to utilize them to the best way you can. That's what SLA is really coming in. You need to negotiate, understand what needs to be done with your carrier side. But also, the most important thing is the solution you're buying for SD-WAN. You need to understand what they can do or cannot do. You need to know the boundary of it. And so there's so many different articles, so many different information out there help you to pick what the SD-WAN is best about. My point of view is SD-WAN really come to shine when you have multiple office and, like Wayne mentioned, a zero touch configuration. That would be the best way to sell and market your SD-WAN solutions.
Okay.
You need to deploy either as agent or hardware based or even software based. When you deploy to your branch office, how can you make all the provisioning be consistent? You have a company policy. How can you make sure your policy being consistent when you deploy from your headquarters all the way to different branch offices?
It's interesting you bring up policy, because closely related to that is politics. And so the speaker yesterday on the SD-WAN topic, folks, he's out there in the real world doing this. Again, tens of sites in the healthcare sector. And there's some politics. As always, there's always politics in IT, but it was funny to kind of bump into that again. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's move on. Oh, and David, I believe, or Wim, do you have another comment? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so just on the sales and marketing, what I've seen with developing software for this is if the sales rep is selling the MPLS solutions and SD-WAN, well, they're going to get a much bigger commission on the MPLS. I'd say 10% of a 3-year contract or 5-year contract. They're going to get a bigger cut than on the SD-WAN. That's one issue. But then for your average smaller MSP to sell SD-WAN, it just kind of depends on the price point. Can they sell that actually? Like, can they convince their client to pay, let's say, to another $250 a month on top of their internet connections? Can they actually sell that? So that's what I've seen, and because it's not a no-brainer price. We just roll it into your MSP bundle. If you're doing their help desk and server support, it's at $250 a month. You got to think twice before you roll into all your clients. That price point is really interesting one, and I haven't seen anybody completely nail that yet.
Interesting. David, any follow-up?
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'll go to David. David, any follow-up on the sales motion? I see, by the way, under handouts, we have 3 handouts from Exclusive Networks, white paper 1, 2, 3. And I guess, David, my feeling is when I think of a distributor, amongst the many things distributors do, but I am looking for them to provide an MSP with sales guidance, sales resources. Is that fair?
Yes, correct. Yeah, so we have our dedicated sales will help you or help MSP to understand how to sell the SD-WAN properly, and also try to come up with the solution for the partner, for the resellers.
Yep. All right, gentlemen, I'm going to click over. Oops. Well, that's not the right click I wanted. Hang on. And we're up to exclusive networks. So, David, it's your turn, my friend. So please properly introduce exclusive networks and let me know when you'd like to go to the next slide to tell your story.
Appreciate that. So, well, again, I just want to let everyone know that I'm really in the technical side. I'm more in tune with the technical technology side of businesses. Exclusive Networks is really a global VAD, value-added distributor. So we're specialized. We actually specialize more into security. So cybersecurity and cloud security is our specialty. So we help pretty much all the partner around the world how to understand technology better. So we run a frequent seminar. We provide demos. We provide pre and or even post-sale support for all our partner. We have logistics. We have warehouse throughout the world.
Yep, and I know you to be, primarily a European company that is really fast and furiously entering the North America market, and in particular North America SMB MSP. Okay, I'll go to the next slide, and I believe we go to Jenny now to kick up the poll question. Jenny, if you could be so kind. While Jenny is doing that, again, if you came in late, I'm coming to you from Austin, Texas. I just finished the Spice World 2019 event. You got to do it once. It's a fun conference every fall in Austin. Reasonably priced. Early bird is $199, and it's full boat with meals and parties and all that. And then I'll see you next week at Continuum Navigate in Pittsburgh. And Jenny, on the ready, if you think people have answered the poll. And Jenny, could you read the poll results? Since I'm main screen, I don't have that available to me.
Of course. Our first choice was endpoint, laptops, desktops, tablets, mobile, etc. was at 80%.
Wow.
Web browsers was at 47%. VPNs at 7%. IoTs at 7%, and all the above is at 20%. So that endpoint sure did take the lead there by quite a bit.
Yeah. And David, would you offer that this meets your expectations, what you believe to be true?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so everybody definitely is more in concern with the endpoints. And later on, we'll talk a little bit more about endpoint protection as well as web browser, VPN, IoT, and all above. One thing I do want to add to Harry's comment earlier is that exclusives coming from Europe, they're based on UK, France, and they about 2 years ago they acquired a company called FineTech, which I was originally working for. FineTech has been in the business for over 20 years. They are the largest. Yeah, FineTech was the largest Fortinet distributor in North America.
Okay. Thank you for that. We'll move on. So, whoa, David, what have you done here, man? My head's spinning. Walk us through this security solution, please.
Yes, exactly. So you guys can see, and if anybody have ever joined any security-related conference, or the biggest one, probably RSA, usually held in San Francisco every year during the January or February timeframe. There's hundreds, if not thousands, vendors in there. You probably can spend whole weeks in there try to find what the difference between them or among them. So if we want to build a security solution, we're going to talk about a little bit later. Basically, I'm talking about end-to-end securities. So you have an endpoint. Now, what about your own network? What about your entry door, your firewall side? You try to build that, and then you try to manage them and also try to monitoring them that's going to be a headache. Now, afterwards, you detect there's a intrusion or you detect there's a breach. What do? So prevention, remediation, all those kind in place. So you try to build a total solution. That's going to be a very hairy task.
Little pun there. Okay, David, would you like me to go to the next slide, my friend?
Yes, please.
Okay. And I'm happy to build it out if you like.
Yeah, just continue.
Okay.
Please.
All right.
Yeah, so in the network operating center, NOC or SOC, you can see that you try to identify the attack. The attack is so broad, right? Attack coming from anywhere, especially endpoint, browser, email, any place. And when they come in, what do you need to do? So you identify them, then you go to the next one, right? So you try to protect against those known threats. So a lot of people understand you have a signature, try to protect your endpoint, to try to prevent those attacks from the firewall point of view. So you try to, those are the known threats. Please go to next. So then you detect known threats. What about the unknown? What about the zero-day attack? What about the consistent attack? What do you do with them? So you need to find a way to integrate the unknown attack into your total solutions. Next, please. That needs a really rapid response because unknown attack, zero attack could be very quick, widespread into the whole network or even into your customer base. What are you going to do? So that's where the SOC coming in, try to help you to prevent that. Next slide, please. So that's, you need automation. So there's an known attack, there's an unknown attack, there's a new attack. You need to automate those, doing the monitoring and management side in order to prevent those happening to your network as well as your customer, your vendor's network. Next slide, please.
All righty. So, folks, we're back with another poll question. If you could be so kind, Jenny, to bring that up, and I'll use the airtime. Again, we're talking SD-WAN with David and Wim today. If you came in late, very popular topic. It was definitely one of the buzzwords here in Austin at the Spice World Conference. And I also want to give a shout out to our sister site. It's over on the lower right, Microsoft 365 Nation. Type in M365 Nation and look for a lot of our security content analysis, including some SD-WAN conversations. Jenny, on the ready, if you think people are at a point where they've answered the question. And what are the results, Jenny?
We are at firewall for 75%,
okay.
Endpoint detection for 58%, cloud security at 50%, log reporting, monitoring, migrations at 50%, and automation at 25%.
David, that is interesting to me that automation would be coming in like a primary presidential candidate who's maybe polling a little bit too low.
Yeah, correct.
Why is that?
I believe because automation sounds like a buzzword. How they will work together, and would there be any loophole that really causing other problems? There's other side impact by automation, especially automation. There's false negative, false negative, all those kind of things, right? So automation usually is something that we as an IT solution provider, we may not be quite 100% clearly identify or explain to our customers.
Okie dokie. Let's keep this party going.
Sorry, can I jump in on that one, Harry?
Yes, sir. Please do.
I was surprised that the firewalls are ranking that high as number one, because I'm like, the industry statistics around ransomware and such is like 2/3 of compromises and breaches are from a human error. Either their password is compromised, or they're clicking on stuff they shouldn't. And firewalls don't hit that at all. It's really education and policy management. So it seems like we have a ways to go, at least with this audience, on these priorities.
Yeah, and folks, do not be alarmed that I have my phone and you're seeing me. Keep an eye on it. This is how Jenny communicates with me to make sure the show keeps running as planned. So thank you, Jenny, for all you do. David, we're back. Fortinet Security Fabric, please.
Yes, actually, when you hit the right point, the right spot. So we talk about there's so many security solutions, and there's also misunderstanding or possibly a little bit lack of education on the user side, on the customer side, to understand how security really play together, right? So when we first talk about security, we say, oh, firewall. Let's put a firewall in. We block everything, right? Not necessarily, right? So you do need an overall solution, end-to-end solution. That's I keep talking about. Sounds like a big scale, but actually you can do it even from your own personal way. Make it as end-to-end security. So, like we go into any house, you have a main entrance door. You lock it. Your best way to lock it. What about your windows? What about your side door? What about your back door? What about the any way people can come into your house? How you block them? So those things really coming from your personal alert. Are you aware of your surrounding? Are you be alert to what you at, where you at, when you are, right? So those kind of things come into place. That's end-to-end solution. So Fortinet Security Fabric is really an architecture. So it provides us because we all confused so many different solutions coming from security vendors. What can we do? So the attack is so broad, coming from any places. How can we find an integrated solution and we can automate it to make it easier for us to use? That's what Security Fabric is really about.
Okay. All right. Well, with your permission, I'll click on. Let's talk Fortinet end-to-end solution.
Thank you very much. So you can look at this that correlated with the security fabrics, try to cover pretty much the whole ends of the possibly hole that breach it or attack can come in. So there's a network security. You use firewall. You use inside reporting, logging to understand, to monitor what's going on within your network. Then you have a different cloud application. You're using one box. You're using different storage place in the cloud, and even could be a Salesforce. How do you protect those cloud access for your own user or your own self, right? And you have endpoint security we'll talk about later. Then email security, all those are coming from different point of view. Then how you protect them. So Fortinet Security Fabric, it really provide a central process, central management to let all those front and tighten all together. And then you can, from the same one single pane of glass, to see what's going on around your network. You don't, that's not complicated. You don't need to go into different vendors solution, try to see what's going on and try to correlate them all together, each other, to understand if you really have any attack. And then after you detect any attack or breaches, you can find a way to mitigate or respond to that. That can be automated into one security fabric architecture.
All righty, and I see our familiar term SD-WAN over in the lower left. Folks, if you joined us late, at the bottom of the hour, we typically have a conversation with our community sponsor. This is Exclusive Networks and Fortinet. Let's continue.
Thank you.
And thank you, David. Let's get back to our party.
Harry, before we get back, we do have one question for, it said, to Wimps and Mark, how about firewalls like SonicWall?
I'll let the panelist answer that. Jenny, could you repeat the question? Forgive me.
Yep. To Wim's remark, how about firewalls like SonicWall?
Okay, David. I don't know. David Wim, do you want to tackle that?
I don't understand. It's a question about SonicWall, but what specifically about SonicWall? What's the question there?
Yeah. Jenny, if you can get a rebound on that, we'll revisit that.
Sure.
Okay, so Wim, I want to talk redundancy. And again, when you and I were kind of preparing this deck, this resonated with me. There was a ISV that sold redundancy down into our SMB space with, we didn't even call them MSPs really back then. They were just partners. And the whole idea was, maybe in a compliance scenario where you have to stay up and running. I've heard examples in retail where you need to stay up and running. So when we're talking SD-WAN, Wim, let's talk about this flip over to the 4G connection to keep the little store up and running. Go.
Yeah, I guess to back up a little bit is the way MPLS is sold to a client is high uptime, pay a lot of money. We're still going to give you one connection, but we're going to fix it quicker for you when it goes down, and we're going to monitor the heck out of it. So you have redundancies. Instead of getting one really expensive connection, you get two cheap ones. And then the basic math is maybe they're only like 98% reliable and they're down for 2 days a year altogether, but they're a different 2 days. So therefore, you're going to get like a 99.9% uptime. So whether that's a DSL and a cable, if you can get it, or a cable or fiber and a 4G, it is having a solution in place to kick you over when it either is completely down or it's sick and kind of half dead. So just shoot it in the head and flip over to your backup connection. So that's the idea of redundancy. And some firewalls, many firewalls have done this for the last 10 years, is having multi-WAN on it. The challenge with that is it can take a while for them to fail over, and often it's still problematic, as well as if you're hosting services in your office like remote desktop, terminal server, a web app server. Those will not be available because it's a different IP address. So if you've got a nice VPN tunneling-based solution with SD-WAN, you'll have the same IP working on both connections if it's done right, depending on the implementation. So you can fail over in like 100 milliseconds, 0.1 of a second, and your users don't notice. Like I've seen this in the real world, that you unplug one of your modems in your back office closet, and your VoIP call doesn't drop. Or maybe you lose a word and it keeps on going. You don't even drop that phone call. So in the days of running, now that we're running phone calls over the internet and GoToMeeting and other wonderful things, you don't even want to be down for a minute. That's already frustrating.
Yep.
So it's not just a long outage, but like the little blips throughout the day that an SD-WAN can help smooth out.
Amen. I hear that. Any thoughts on redundancy, David, you'd like to contribute?
Yes. Recently, well, for the past pretty much half year already, we've been selling. We do staging in my department. So we so-called staging, meaning that we pre-configure the firewall and as well as secondary internet connections such as 4G modem, and we ship to the customer. So I can see the volume start increasing because a lot of remote site, they don't have a very good, very stable, or they don't have really a multiple internet service provider, so they use 4G as their backup. And apparently the switching side, just like we mentioned, the failover is very, very fairly quick. So people start buying it, start using it without any problem. I think that's a very good solution for the remote site.
Okay, and as we get into the next topic again, folks, I realize you can read as well as I can what's on the screen about speed, but I do want to bring up an interesting point from yesterday's lecture on SD-WAN here at Spice World, and that was the gentleman asked the audience, what's the coolest tech city in the USA? And you would expect to have heard Austin or Seattle or Boston or San Jose. And he said, no, he said, it's actually Fort Collins, Colorado. And I said, or the audience collectively said, why is that? And what Fort Collins did, and Wim, this goes back to his knock at Comcast, what Fort Collins did at the city government level was put in a municipal WAN, gigabyte speed. Oops, am I back? I think I dropped for it.
Yes.
Okay, I'm back. So you heard my rap on Fort Collins and cool. And so the municipal government in Fort Collins it essentially competes with Comcast, and that elicited chuckles and so on. But it was an eye opener that they made that decision to do that in that city to each node. And he then brought it into this conversation here.
that about the speed. Now, most of us don't live in Fort Collins, Colorado, so Wim, what we're talking about is aggregation of bandwidth. Please talk about speed if you don't mind.
Yeah, there's always a need for speed. So when you're using these broadband connections, and this is obviously connections have improved overall with fiber and the DOCSIS 4 and other things coming out. But a big thing for me has always been like the upload speed. Like you might have a connection that's, let's say, 10 megabit down. If you want to go 1 meg up, that's your bottleneck, and that's with uploading, video, everything like that. So how do you take multiple cheap connections and then get the full bandwidth of all of them? So if you do a speed test, you're seeing if you got 4 connections and the 10 meg each, getting 30 to 40 down. And if they're 1 meg up each, then getting 3 to 4 meg up as well. So that's the basic pitch on speed.
Yep. David,
it's really that
thoughts?
simple, yeah.
Yeah, any thoughts, David, before I go to the next slide?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've been seeing is SD-WAN can be even fine-tuning based on application, and also based on because the speed sometimes fluctuate, right? So you can check the latency, you can check different type of application to give different volume or different size of speed to provide the best for your applications. That's the optimization of the part. Refer back to our provisioning configuration side.
Yep. And again, I probably just caused a stampede of people moving to Fort Collins, Colorado. Who would have thought it? Okay, so we're turning the corner. We're turning the corner on our conversations here, folks. And Jenny, don't be bashful if a couple questions come in. While we're doing that, we'll start on the left. SD-WAN provides higher SLA levels without the high cost of however, Wim, here's the key point. Many SD-WAN solutions are getting quite pricey now too. So let's talk about that. Why? Why are SD-WAN solutions getting pricey?
The why? I'm not sure. It's because there's this competition out there. There's more and more players, but I guess the people are realizing MPLS is maybe kind of disappearing, and they're getting into SD-WAN. It's just more of an enterprise solution. But your SMBs don't want to play enterprise pricing. So I play more in the SMB MSP world where companies are 100, 200 users max, not in the enterprise where you're like 500 or 1,000 users. Maybe they're willing to pay that, but having a solution appropriate to that market and the price point is really important.
Yeah, and I'll pitch in here. Yeah. So again, in yesterday's lecture, once again, the level set, it was a healthcare organization, 41 assisted living sites, smart guy up on stage. And he showed some math, before they went with SD-WAN, if my recollection's correct, he was paying $100,000 a year in aggregate for this type of solution, and then he got it down to $9,000 a year with an SD-WAN solution. However, here's what's occurred, is that the solution he was using, which I don't have the name in front of me, got acquired. They got acquired by another company, and the other company was a good citizen. They just let the existing low-cost solution sit for a couple of years, 3 years. Now, the other companies rebranding and doing this and doing that, and the price is now going to go up to about $30,000 a year from $9,000. But he said, you know what? He said the transfer cost or the migration cost or the switching cost, along with the disruption, would be far higher than that. So, his feeling was that's the way the ball bounces. So we were seeing higher prices coming, Wim, via an acquisition of a very large company that then wanted to, quite frankly, increase the price. David, let's talk about pricing in SD-WAN solutions. We've talked about how cost effective it is, but it sounds like you indeed can spend money in this area.
Well, to be honest with you, Harry, I'm not sure where the price increase coming from really, because
it's greed.
Well, maybe. So because what I've seen is really the people using multiple different carriers. They try to find the best price because they have either most likely on-premise solution. The on-premise solutions such as I hate to bring that one, but Fortinet has the SD-WAN built into it, so they can bring multiple a cluster of internet service provider. It could be 2, could be 3, could be 4, or even higher, and then try to aggregate the speed, the bandwidth altogether. I think that's actually the way to go. And even in the fiber, there's a asymmetric and also symmetric, right? So you can, if you don't have that much upload application, probably you can do asymmetric to get a much lower price but much higher download speed.
Yep. Yep. And that's a good lead into this point that again is pretty self-explanatory. Wim, you've actually kind of covered off on this about upload and download speed. So let me drop down to the rock solid VoIP, because this has been one of my eternal frustrations. Boy, let me get on my soapbox. In the history of SMB Nation, we raised our hand, and guys, it might have been 2004. It was certainly 2005. And we raised our hand and wanted to introduce the voice conversation into what is primarily a data community. At that time, it was Small Business Server. And we did it with a couple of ways. Initially, it was a vendor that had call center software that wasn't quite the right conversation for our space. And then came the infamous Microsoft Response Point product. And in that same era, the Skype acquisition was somewhere in there. And Wim, we all remember all too well the verb voiping, the warbles, you heard that were like this, and you had engineer what I said. How'd I do, Wim?
Good job on that. Really good.
Good.
I wasn't sure if it was real or you're faking it there. So
Yeah, I faked
Exactly. Exactly.
it. Wim, hit it head on about rock solid VoIP, and then we'll have David comment.
yeah, that's the one thing that will tick a customer off big time and get you and have them cancel on you is messing with their dial tone. The dial tone's got to work, and they don't want garbled voice because it's super frustrating. And then they're like, screw the VoIP, I'm going to use my cell phone, or I'm going back to analog. So we've got to provide that high level of reliability. That comes and quality, and that comes before features. Like you can talk about complicated call routing and voicemail to email, all that stuff, but if you cannot covering these table stakes, like these foundation things of a quality conversation, and it's just working when you pick it up and not dropping after a minute or an hour, that's so important.
Yeah.
So that's overall, that's the goal, the result the client wants. And then, but the things that there's so many ways they can break. Just like email, there's a way, like emails can go to junk mail and spam, and you got DNS issues, and your mailbox is full, and your hard drive is an issue, your Outlook bugs out. Well, you get the same kind of issues with VoIP of some other user is sitting on Netflix, or their Dropbox is synchronizing 100 megs of data up, and it's using up your upload, and it's squeezing out your puny little VoIP call. So prioritizing traffic is a huge one there.
Yeah. David, thoughts?
Yeah, so I still remember the day that I was using VoIP, and then nobody can accept that. People just say, don't do it. Don't ever do it. Don't call me with your VoIP. Just call me with a regular cell phone or landline, right? So, but now the SD-WAN, I think the SD-WAN is the most important thing because software defined. So software understand what application you're using. So they break it up, the control panel and manager panel. So the execution is different from the control. So manager side, they understand which application, they will pick the best optimized route for the data traffic really comes through. So I think SD-WAN is really will help the industry to grow. So the VoIP is actually one of the major applications for SD-WAN.
Yeah, and I would concur. Two more thoughts. One is going back to my early experiences. I'll roll with the Microsoft response point. I wrote a book on it, and not that I'm a voice expert by any stretch, but I was with the team in Microsoft Research, and they coached me, and we literally had a passage in the book. And we literally had a passage in some Microsoft guidance that you should have two lines with Comcast. I'll compliment Comcast now, but you would have two different lines with Comcast. You put VoIP over here and data over here. And that's how we handled the routing. And we literally wrote that up. And that's because that was just the state of the union. The second thought is I found myself 2 days ago saying I don't trust Microsoft, which is an unusual thing for me to say because to some extent in Seattle, we all have a dependency on Microsoft for our well-being. But here's what I mean. Microsoft is not a telecom. And so after the response point experience, basically Microsoft realized this isn't really what we do. We're not in this line of work. We're going to leave it to the good people at Cisco and other places to do what they do best. And so then you had Skype, and Skype became Link, and Link became Teams. And gentlemen, Microsoft has to re-earn my respect and trust in the telecom area. We are being recorded, so you don't have to comment on that, but I've gone on the record. They have to earn my trust again. But I
guess
do
just on the team side, they've been investing a ton of money into that as being the business phone system with chat, and they want to kill Slack and kill all these other VoIP things. So they're I just watched a webinar from a peer colleague in Chicago yesterday, just doing just a full hands-on demo of the Teams environment for phones, and it replaces any PBX out there. It does all the trunking, moving your phone numbers, and they're handling the reliability and the scalability. So I'm not using it, but I'm like, don't underestimate Microsoft and the money behind them and their ability to throw 1,000 engineers at a problem and make it go away forever.
I know, Wim, but they have to earn my trust back. I know what you're saying, and they always get it right on the 30th time, or the third time.
Yeah, just want to add to that point is
David,
the whole exclusive global wise, we're using Microsoft Teams. So
okay.
we hold our meeting. We even do with our salespeople in North America. They even do sales meeting, sales conference call with a third party with a reseller using Microsoft Teams. So reseller, we use the phone number to dial, and within the exclusive global, we use a desktop headphone set to do that. So it's actually pretty smooth so far.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm just getting old. David, I'm just getting old and fussy. Let's move on. We're approaching the end of the formal presentation, and Jenny, I'll anytime if you want to interrupt, that's fine. I feel the best for last. We've actually covered the very last point. Quite frankly, we'll revisit intermittent connectivity, but this was what I liked is when we were rehearsing and you said make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, I caught that. So let's talk about packet loss and trash network performance. And you say here 3% will make your network feel like a dial-up. Go ahead, Wim.
Yeah, so with packet loss, especially with the TCP protocol, which is any web, email, most things on the internet, like 95% of traffic is TCP. If you lose a packet and you lose a couple more, your connection will assume there's congestion, that it's been slowed down, and it will drop significantly the speeds to try and recover, and then it'll build the performance back up. So if you're losing 3%, it depends like which 3%, if it's like consecutive or if it is every 100 packets, that will be a difference. But if you lose the burst of packets, it's going to go back to dial-up speeds and then slowly ramp up if it trusts your line again.
Yeah, and
so
it's noticeable. Wim, back when I carried the bag, and this is not an SD-WAN concept, but I can tell you this. inevitably on a Friday afternoon about 2 p.m. when I was kind of, one foot out the door, I would always get two calls. Number one, I can't print. And we talked about that yesterday in that lecture, by the way, with remote desktop, and printing is still can be a challenge. But that's an aside. But number one, I can't print. Number two, Harry, the network's running slow. We need you to drive all the way across town and check it out. And it was Pat, the secretary at a real estate company, about 70 users. But David, it is so visible when a network's running slow. You know what I'm trying to say? That people feel that.
Yeah, tell me about my boss often come to me and say, David, why the Wi-Fi is so slow? Why is my network slow? I say, well, I didn't
Yeah.
see that. Mine's fine.
Yeah, exactly. We talked, essentially, we've checked off on what would be the final point. Another performance matters, intermittent connectivity. How do you deal with this? Well, the short answer is SD-WAN. With that said, I'm going to take us to the questions page. Folks, we kept it to an hour today. As you know, we always respect your time. There's been a time and a place we've gone over our 90 minutes. There's times that we come in under 90 minutes and buy back 30 minutes. We've never had a complaint on that. Ginny, I want to turn it over to you just to verify that maybe the coast is clear with respect to questions, or do we have questions?
We have two questions/comments. So the first one is, Wimps seems to be saying that firewalls don't provide endpoint protection, but SonicWall does.
Okay. That sounds like maybe a little bit, or go ahead, Wim.
I can clarify, I guess, my perspective is obviously you need to have a firewall. It's a basic thing, but it doesn't protect against somebody clicking a link they shouldn't. Yes, the firewall may be able to block that URL by DNS or some other way if you're using that feature. But there's still a lot of ways. There's with some of these things of living from the land, where they're using like PowerShell vulnerabilities or Word macros, that firewall is probably not going to be able to help with. But yes, you still need an endpoint antivirus. I don't know if SonicWall has one. We're a Sophos partner, so we use their firewalls and their endpoints. So definitely would run both. But I know that they can still get compromised even with everything being green and checked off there. And that's coming down to education is the weakest link in people.
Yeah, David, would you like to pitch in on that? Or maybe how does Fortinet play in that reindeer game in that context?
So definitely, Fortinet is a competitor against SonicWall and Sophos in every way. So Fortinet actually has firewall as well as FortiClient as endpoints. I want to bring up the FortiClient. Maybe it's not as famous or popular as Sophos or any other endpoints. FortiClient actually not just as endpoint protection, but also we could so-called network access control. So it can work with the FortiGate through the security fabric. Then you can set up a policy compliant to make sure when the endpoints goes out, try to go to the internet. First of all, it get all the updates. We know Microsoft has a whole bunch of updates. You get all the updates. And also, if you have any company policy, you want to enforce certain rules, you can place that on an endpoint and as well as the firewall FortiGate. So that in that way, the endpoints fully compliant with within your organization. Thirdly, when they travel, they can use the VPN connect back to the company network. However, the VPN side of it, even though you have split tunneling, will still need to be compliant with the company policies. So all those rules still applies, even with the web filtering, application control, all those next generation firewall rules all set in there. Again, firewall is not only support solution, just like I mentioned earlier, end-to-end solution is the most important thing. You want to well protect against nothing's 100%, but at least you can reach to 99.9% if you want to.
Yeah, and I'll pitch in on this that every darn tootin' show I go to this fall, that's part of my job as an analyst, is to go to shows. Thank you. And It seems like every darn tootin' show I go to is Know Before out of the Tampa Bay area, Clearwater, Florida. Know Before is, Wim, to your point about, education. So Know Before is about user education, to not click that link in these emails that are now gorgeous and look so real. That's the short story of what they do. There's a lot longer story. They've raised probably north of $100 million in capital, including Goldman Sachs. So they definitely hit. And just as an aside for those listening, they have a very robust college internship program. So a lot of us on the call have kids in college who might like a career in this area. And gentlemen, not only do you get paid, you get to spend the summer in the Tampa Bay area, but they provide corporate housing for free. I mean, this is old school. So shout out to Know Before in the education area. Jenny, back to you. You said you might have another observation to share with us.
Yep. Just observation plus question. Back on one of the slides, it said speed, pretend that you can get fiber, or it's too expensive, or should it read that you can't get fiber, or is it too expensive?
Yeah. No, fair enough. That might have slipped by. Jenny, could you assist me on the other side of the aisle, and let's get an appointment time to get to the eye doctor for new glasses. So that one's on me. With that said, folks, we're just a couple minutes after 1 p.m. on the West Coast. It's 3 p.m. Central, 4 Eastern. As I always like to say, it's sort of our daytime in the U.S. It's time for Larry Doyle in Dublin, Ireland to go have a beer. It's his evening. And good morning, Asia. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. And gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We will get some contact information out in the thank you note, Jenny, as well as the deck. And once again, a shout out before we go to the control panel and go to downloads and look at the 3 white papers from Exclusive Networks. And David, Wim, I'm now looking at us on camera. I was screen number 1, so I minimized the camera view. David, you're the real deal. Look at that workspace of yours, sir. You are an engineer.
Yeah, there's
Wim,
there's a firewall.
Wim, you look.
That's a firewall over there.
There we go. And Wim, you look like a CEO, my friend.
You bet. Yeah.
So, all righty.
Got all the CEO books in the CEO books in the background, as you can see. So Traction and Phoenix Project and great thing. So
nice. Real nice.
There we go. Hey, and Wim, I'll tell you what, we'll end on this. Wim endorsed a book recommended by security guru Dana App. Dana's my friend. He recommended I read a book called Mom, M-O-M. It's like $10 up on Amazon. And Wim confirmed I need to read it on my next flight. I fly home today, Wim, 3.5 hours up to Seattle. He said it's an airplane book. Mom is about listening to your customers in terms of product development, product design, and so on. So Wim, thank you for bringing that up when you and I got together recently at the ConnectWise user group in Seattle for dinner. Thank you very much. Everybody have a great day. Thanks, Jenny. Go ahead and take us out.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Take care.